don't like to do sign-in sheets because I don't get to know students. I never know the names. I would like to know the names. But it's faster, I understand. Okay, chapter 9 talks about regional economic integration. Now, regional economic integration, these days you might see a lot of economic integrations around the world. When we talk about regional economic integration, we're talking about a region who is economically, just exactly from the name, a region which is economically integrated. A good example, for example, NAFTA, right, that we have, which we're going to actually do NAFTA 2.0, which would be USMCA, right? So that's an example of a region that is economically integrated, right? We're doing a lot of low tariffs or quotas, removing a lot of barriers and all that, so we can probably do more trade, more volume of trade, more investment. Another good example is Europe, right? They have a very good regional economic integration. They're all in one region. Economically, they're highly integrated. Now, I have a question for you guys. Do you believe that our economic integration, NAFTA, is it almost the same as European Union, EU, the economic integration? They're both economic integrations, but are they almost the same? They're not. They're very different, right? Because we're still very, very basic. But they're much more advanced in integration, right? So this chapter talks about different types of regional economic integration. The differences, similarities, examples. Many countries around the world have a lot of economic integrations. Economic integration, the most stable ones, the most common ones to use are regional ones. So we have regional economic integration. First of all, the reason for regional economic integration is, you will hear economic reasons, but before economic reasons is political reasons. Political stability. Countries after World War I and World War II, they have noticed, and economists too, politicians, economists, they have noticed, the more a region is stable, the more politically stable, the more economically countries doing better, right? If a region is unstable, too much fluctuations in currency demand, right? Currency goes high, goes down, it's not very stable. So the region, well, one of the, for example, unstable regions in the world, we always call it Middle East, right? It's a lot of turmoil. It's just a region, the entire region. When it's more stability in the entire region, you see more economic advancement because more money comes in. Investors trust it, so there's not high risk. Investors will invest. However, that's why a region is very important. The first thing that will impact your economy, even if your country is safe and stable, hypothetically, the first thing that will impact it to become unstable is your neighboring countries. Let's say United States is stable. Mexico has always war. Canada has always war. How can United States be, how long can it sustain its stability, right? It will become, within a region that is very unstable, it will become eventually fragile, right? It will become unstable. That's why neighboring countries are very important. Therefore, and the more politically stable, the more economic advancement, more economic economies will flourish. That's what always economists say, the first thing you want to do is to have a deal with your neighboring country, to be friends with your neighboring country. Now, another example I can tell you guys, because I did my research, my dissertation was about economic sanctioned nations. Why a sanction, severe sanction, can really detrimentally collapse, basically make a country collapse, and why some sanctions wouldn't, right? There are two main reasons. One is the volume of trade you have with that country, and the other one, very important, geographic proximity. the further the country is, the less impact they can have. If it's your neighboring country and you share a border and they basically put sanction on you, it will be detrimental. Why? For example, this is my own research that I've done. When the United States poses sanction on Iran because it's exactly half world away, by the time it goes to Iran, because it goes through a lot of different countries, change the label, changes everything, it goes there fine. Doesn't matter, right? Now, backdoor to Iran has always been Turkey or United Arab Emirates for some point. If those two countries block, now there's very difficult to have, which they did right now, now it's very difficult to have any relationship with Iran, right? Remember we talked about landlocked countries? How they have to do with it. So landlocked countries, let's say we have water border and all that, but even the water border, you have to pass through neighbors, like international waters, right? So therefore, it makes it, neighbors are very, very important. That's why countries, they want to make sure they have regional agreements. They make a region stable. They make a region very strong, rather than only one country, because that's not sustainable. Now, the reason behind regional economic integration, the first is political stability, and then the second is, in reality, is economies. Now, as I said, there are two, most of the countries around the world, they have regional economic integrations, some form. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's successful, doesn't necessarily mean it's doing great, but at some point in their history, they probably had some economic integration, regional economic integration. Now, other integrations, other agreements could be bilateral agreement or multilateral agreements. Doesn't necessarily need to be regional, but for example, bilateral agreements. United States, Korea, United States agreement, for example. It's not a region, but it's just bilateral agreement. Well, it says like reduce tariffs and quotas for each other. It doesn't mean it eliminates, but they reduce it. Another example could be multilateral agreements, could be United States, Korea, and European Union. Now, this is multilateral agreements, right? So all of these are very, very common around the world, but the most influential one is the regional agreement when you're really integrated. So the example of here, you see Africa. Africa has in general about 9 trade agreements. Almost none of them have been successful. Only one in East Africa has been on and off, has seen some success, and then again stopped it again. I'm sorry, it's 17 it says here. So we're going to show the 9 where it came from. Tri-party free trade area signed in 2015 by 26 African nations. Nations would work together to establish free trade area. 17 African trading blocs made it difficult to realize gains from trade that could flow from an expected single market. Intra-African made inconvenient, and African countries more likely to trade with US and Europe than each other. TFTA, which is Tri-Party Free Trade Area, has been difficult to implement. So it has never been African trade agreements, regional trade agreements have never been successful historically. Now, let's go, this is basically the most important part of your chapter 9, which shows different levels of agreement, okay? Now, United States is here, Free Trade Area, FTA. It's an example of NAFTA. It's the loosest form of free trade agreement, regional trade area, okay? Which is called FTA. What do we do? Think about always factors of production. What are the factors of production? Labor, capital, land, right? So if you think, or it could be finished goods too. In this case, we are adding finished goods. Here in free trade area, only finished goods can move freely, not labor and not capital, right? So that's why it's the loosest form, because only finished goods can move freely. We can finish it in Mexico, bring it here with no tariff or quotas, perhaps. It's not 100% eliminated. We just removed it by 99%, but we're adding again by USMCA. We're adding more again to it. Now, so you see free trade area here. Removal of intra-group tariffs. Intra-group NAFTA example, US, Mexico, and Canada. So we remove the tariff or trade barriers for all these three countries. Now, the steps, each of these columns that we move towards, right? You see that other ones adding to it. Each of these columns has the characteristics of the former and the AU one, okay? So the purple one, for example, has the characteristics of these two and then adding one new to it, which that's how they become more integrated, which the last one is political union. Now, free trade area, only the movement of finished goods, which is what we have. A good example, NAFTA. The second one, customs union, common external tariff. Customs union, they already removed the intra-tariff groups, right? A good example of customs union is Mercosur. Mercosur includes, it's in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay. It used to be Venezuela too, but they removed Venezuela. So it already has these characteristics, but it has common external tariff, which it's called CET. If you see in your book or in your test, it's called CET. So what is CET? Common external tariff means if one of those member states, in our example, for example, Brazil, removes tariff for outside of the group, for outer group members, so should the other ones. For example, Brazil says, from now on, I'm not going to put any tariff on imported American automobiles, right? Ford can come freely to Brazil, no tariff anymore. So Argentina, Paraguay, and Uruguay should do the same thing because their policies is integrated. Everything should be the same. Versus we don't have that policy. Each country can independently have tariffs imposed or tariffs removed with other countries, right? So that's a good example of customs union. We have another one, Andean Community, Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. These four countries, Andean Community, also in Latin America, also they have customs union imposed, which is removal of intra-group tariffs and CET, common external tariff. The next level, it's common market. Now you see here, free movement of goods, people, and capital. About common markets, because I've been teaching international business for so long and I've been teaching different textbooks. You see textbooks have different definitions of the example. For example, European Union, some textbooks, most textbooks put it here in European Economic Union. There's some textbooks that they put it here, common market. I will tell you guys, I personally believe it's more up to common market, if not it's somewhere in the middle. But I will tell you guys why that's how I believe it. Common market, first of all, says free movement of goods, people, and capital. So you know exactly what it means, right? There's no visa for them, just like European Union. Capital can move. If you're a physician in one country, you can practice in another country, so standards are same, certificates are same, everything is same. You don't need to report if you're taking basically 1 million euro from one country to another country. You don't need to report if they're within European Union. People don't need visa. Unfinished goods can be transferred anywhere within the zone. Now, the reason that I believe there is one problem here. European Union has common currency, right? So because they have common currency, they might not be 100% here because it doesn't say about that, right? It says when you go to economic union, it says common economic policies. The two major components of economies are fiscal policy and monetary policy, okay? European Union does have the same monetary policy as far as the currency, right? However, it doesn't have the same fiscal policy, which is taxation. The more you move from south to north, the higher your taxes become. So each country has its own completely autonomous tax policies. That's why fiscal policy is not the same. That's why you cannot put them 100% under economic union, because under economic union must be exactly common economic policies, which the two major components are part of economic policies, monetary and fiscal policy. But however, because here under common market, it doesn't say at least common common monetary policies, we cannot put him here either. So that's what I'm saying. Honestly, you definitely cannot put him here. I believe it's mostly like towards common market. If not, there is somewhere between here because one of the components are there, but the other one is not. Now, they were trying to work on that too, but right now they're going through a lot of turmoils because the United Kingdom is Brexit we see is happening right now, and then other countries are coming up with more protectionist policies. Therefore, they want to actually separate themselves, exit rather than integrate more. So that's as far as economic union, both components, everything must be the same, common policies. And then the last one, political union, which integration of political and economic affairs, which is two countries join and become one country. Like West Germany and East Germany, they became one country. Or some people say United States is a good example too, because in like 400 years ago it was federated, right? And then all of a sudden they all joined together under one country. That's a good example too. And now we're going to see the different examples, the definitions. Now, European Union didn't start right away. Since 1950s, especially 1951, the steel and coal community was working under this common agreement because they felt like workers in coal industry and steel industry, they're being discriminated in different countries. Now, I want you to think about this. I don't know if you guys have been to Europe before, but Europe, the entire size of Europe is extremely small. Too many countries, even Germany, that is one of the largest countries in Europe, is smaller than California. So think about this. When we talk about United States, we're thinking about different states, like how business is done within the states. That's how it was. On a daily, because I lived in Europe, on a daily basis, like businessmen, and it was in the 80s when I lived, I wasn't born, I'm talking about my parents, but I was in high school. When in 1980s, when it was like each country was sovereign nation, they would actually, a businessman would fly in the morning, go to Switzerland, do a deal, and come back for like 5 or 6 o'clock at home. Like the flight to Switzerland probably is like 45 minutes from Germany. To Holland, you don't even need to fly, you can take the train. France is just right there. Switzerland, Austria, all of those, but at that time it was not the east part, but right now you can even include east part too, which is Prague, Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, all of those too. But at that time you couldn't include it. So all of those could be done in one day. Now the transportation cost and currency exchange cost was so huge. That's why workers, and especially in western part like France and Germany and Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, all of those workers could work. I mean, you needed permission, but they had cards, not the visa, but they had their own cards. So because of that, all the workers united, and they wanted to make sure they have exact same standards among those small nations in the Western Europe. That's how it started in 1950s. The European Free Trade Association was between Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and Switzerland. Now, I want you to know that Iceland today has about, I think, 352,000 population. Like Irvine has 250,000. I just want you to know. I think city of Carson has a lot bigger than that. That's what I'm saying. Forget about LA and all that. So these are the countries that we're talking about. That's why for them to have a united, like in regional economic integration, I think it really did make sense. Because of the size and the volume of trade was huge, because they were all the strong countries, a lot of exportation, a lot of trade, and it was a lot of cost. Exchange currency, flights, the customs, paperwork, employees that they had to hire at the customs. So right now it's all treated as one country. So it has reduced a lot of expenses for them. But when they expanded beyond that and included the former Soviet Union blocs, which was all Eastern countries, that was when they believed that problem started. For example, Brexit happened because they believed a lot of Eastern European countries have joined them and took their jobs, for example, away. Well, I talked already about this one, but let me come up with show you the examples. Now, some people believe that some people are against it. This is just a philosophy. Some people are against it, some people are for it. If it creates jobs and trade, and it helps my balance of basically balance of payment increase to go to surplus, then it's good. Let's do it. This is just a philosophy. Each country thinks that way. If it's not good, if it's diverting trade from my country to another country, let's just don't do it then. Okay, this is, right now it has, European Union has 28 members. Britain has voted to exit. In 2016 they have voted. They gave them 2 years, which is right now, 2018, they just started the discussions, so Britain can exit. European Free Trade Association with 4 members, we just talked about it. The European Union is a result of devastation of 2 world wars on Western Europe and the desire for lasting peace, the desire by the European nations to hold their own on the world's political and economic stage. The forerunners of the EU, which was in 1951, the idea was developed among European coal and steel community, which was from very small countries of Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, and all that. The Treaty of Rome, a little bit later, 1957, it started EEC, European Economic Community. The name was changed to EU in 1993. So this has been going on for about 50, 60 years. It was nothing new. We just knew it in a way in 1990s, which we know it today, but that was going on for a very long time. Member state of the European Union. Okay, so these are the applicants of the European Union, okay? Now, the rest of them, members of the European Union, non-members of the European Union. Non-members, you see, of course, is Russia, which probably not anytime soon you will join, right? Because they have sanctions over Russia's annexation of Crimea. Norway didn't want to, because Norway has a lot of oil. It's a very rich country, they didn't want to. A couple countries, including Sweden, Denmark, and Switzerland, here, they actually wanted to pull out of the common currency. They are part of this European zone, but they didn't sign the agreement of becoming under the same common currency. They signed it, but they pulled out after. The only one that didn't sign was United Kingdom from the beginning, didn't sign the currency agreement. But those 3 signed, and then they pulled out. Now, about these 3, Turkey, we're going to talk about the system of European Union, and I'll tell you why Turkey, you see here, is still in orange. This is the political structure. I just talked about, if you think about Europe, think about a country. Just like United States, we have different states, we have autonomy over some certain areas in our country, but some other areas is federal decision, right? That's how it is too. European Commission, and then we have, how do we work? Each state has its own assembly and senate, right? That's what they do in sovereign nations. And then all together, they have a Congress and Senate, just like what we do. This is their Congress and Senate too. European Commission proposes EU legislation, implements it, and monitors compliance. European Council, the ultimate controlling authority within the EU. The European Parliament debates legislation proposed by the Commission. So this one proposes to this one approves and goes to this, okay? And then the Court of Justice is just the Supreme Court. They just implement. Debates legislation proposed by the Commission and forwards it to the Council. So you see first, second, third, and they just implement it, right? Now, the Parliament, how do we choose our members? Senate, each state has 2 senators, right? And then the rest, Congress is by the population. The bigger population, like California, has a lot of congressmen and women because of the population. That's how it works in Europe as well. European Parliament, they send representatives according to their population. The larger population, right now currently, for example, Germany has the largest population, so they have more representatives in Parliament. Now, if they allow Turkey, which is 98% Muslim majority country, allowed to join the European Union, Turkey has to have also parliament members too, right? The problem is that right now Germany has about 96 million population, which is sharply dropping, right? In 20 years, for example, 30 years, I think more than 50% of their population will be over 65 years old. Okay, so that's why they opened up their immigration policies late 1990s. Germany never had immigration policy before. You could stay there for as long as you want if you have visa or green card permanent. If you translate it to equivalent to the United States, it will be green card. But they didn't have immigration policies to convert to become a citizen. Late 1990s, they changed that policy because they wanted to have immigrants, because they want to make sure they're citizens. They have young citizens. They did, so it has helped them a lot compared to Japan. They did it. However, it is still going down sharply. On the other hand, Turkey has 76 million or 78 million currently population, which is sharply going up. So in 30 years, or let's say in 50 years, Turkey will have the highest population in entire Europe. So they have to have more members in the parliament, the most members in the parliament. Therefore, they don't want to, and Turkey's application was there for 10 years. Therefore, they didn't want to allow Turkey to join in because ultimately, you'll be, and when you do something right now in this type of level, you're not doing it for yourself for 10 years or 5 years, right? You're doing historically for the entire 100 years to come. So they knew if that happens, Turkey will have the highest, most power within the parliament to basically implement any policy, which was the only Muslim majority country in entire Europe. However, later on, when Greece failed, when Portugal failed, when Italy failed and all that, Turkey did not insist of joining Europe anymore because it was strong enough and they've noticed the failure of the other countries. So they decided to basically be neutral, and for now, they're not trying to join the European Union at all. EC with European communities committed in EC countries to work towards establishment of a single market. I think we talked about all of these. Maastricht Treaty was the one that, Maastricht Treaty is the currency treaty, the common currency, implementing all common currency. The euro is used by 19 out of 28 member states as of now. UK never joined, the rest of them pulled out. Britain, Denmark, Sweden are still on the sidelines, and a lot of other countries, for example, too, the smaller ones. Benefits of the euro, as I said, it's comparison of the prices are easier, and they have reduced the transaction costs. That was one of the main reasons. Optimal common currency basically means like, if you have that currency across a whole region, it will help all the economies, right? It actually says it did not help them because, for example, in Romania, Bulgaria, or other smaller countries that joined, if it would be euro, the cost of labor, for example, will go high too. So it showed that because of the very different levels of countries that were part of the member states, it didn't actually prove to be the optimal currency for the entire area. Now, euro, when euro started, $1 was equal to €2 when it started 25 years ago. But and then 20 years ago. But and then it went up, euro actually picked up, appreciated more and more and more, and dollar went down. It actually at some point passed, in 2008, last 10 years ago, it passed the value of dollar, so dollar depreciated and euro appreciated. Right now, I think it's, and then it became down, it was almost equal. Right now, I think dollar is a little bit weaker. Euro was valued at 117, then fell in value, but this is 2008. I think the value for today, okay, so $1, yeah, this is still lower. Like the dollar is still lower. Euro is still stronger. It's very close right now, but still, it's only 12 cents, but still 13 cents. But still, dollars is still weaker. So when they started European Union, dollar was way stronger. Croatia was the last one to join as the 28th nation to join the EU. We all know about Brexit. Their issue was immigration, was one of their biggest issues. As I said, like I said, Eastern European countries, their workers come here and they accept jobs below the market price, so therefore they're taking our jobs away. For a very short period of time, when the Brexit passed, their stock went down and the currency depreciated. But right now it has recovered. So we don't know in the future if we will actually help the currency or it will actually basically hinder the currency. But one thing that we know by formula is that the higher demand for a currency, the stronger the currency will stay. Because Brexit right now is exiting, demand for that currency will actually drop because of the volume of trade. So countries within the region, they will do probably even a little bit less, but they will do less trading with Britain. And that will actually not help their currency to appreciate. Economic integration in Americas. You see here Mercosur, we talked about it. Brazil, Argentina, Paraguay, Uruguay. Andean Community, Ecuador, Bolivia, Colombia, and Central America, it's called CAFTA. For Central America, it's called CAFTA, Central American Free Trade Area. So it's called CAFTA, all of them together. Caribbean Community here, we have CARICOM, Caribbean Community. Now, we do have CAFTA-US. So US has an agreement with entire Central America. US has, for example, agreement with Caribbean Community. So it's CARICOM-US. So we do have those agreements as well. We already talked about this. Now, I want you guys to look into the new NAFTA agreement, which is here. USMCA, Trump's new NAFTA deal, explained in 500 words. So this is the new deal. The difference is it's called NAFTA 2.0. So, here it says, it's basically called NAFTA 2.0. These are the major changes that have been done. Country of origin rules, automobiles. Previously,